This is Erica here, Media Communications Director at Criterion HCM, and I am excited to be joined by Libra Forde, the COO of Enhancement, Inc., for another session of Criterion's Future of Work series. Today, we're going to be talking about employee engagement, remote work, and learning with Libra. So let's begin with employee engagement. So Libra, how do you motivate and keep your employees engaged?
Great question, because you need motivated employees in order to get motivated work, right? And so I use a thing called BOLD. And the reason why I like the word bold is because I'm a pretty bold person in most things that I do. Of course, you're never one thing in everything, but in most things that I do, I'm very bold. And BOLD for me is an acronym, and that stands for behavior acknowledgement. So acknowledging what people's behavior is, not necessarily what you want it to be, but what is it in this moment, observing where those behaviors are coming from and what's influencing those behaviors. So that's the O, the observation part of it. And then the L is listening to employees from their perspective and their lived experience, listening to that. And D is differentiate the difference between what is a symptom in that behavior and what is the actual disease. And so in that bold approach is how I try to motivate people, because it's not me telling them how to be motivated. It's an acknowledgement and a listening to where they're at, and then giving them all the tools that they are needing to stay motivated and stay focused.
Okay, so I think this is a good time to give some background because you have such a specific niche of what your company does. Can you tell us a little bit about what your company does?
Yeah, so Enhancement Incorporated has been around 40 years. We're a multi-service agency. We focus on youth and families, specifically Black youth and families in the Portland metro area. And we do it for the youth in three ways. We start with in-school programming. We attach to 6 different districts here in Portland metro area. And in that in-school program, we do case management throughout the day with the students to make sure that they're successful in the building. Then we also do after-school programming, which is our exposure element of our model, where we expose them to things that maybe in their economic status they would have never seen. And then we do summer school programming, which will, of course, enhance their academics, as well as move them forward to the next year and the next phase. We do that in a continuum from middle school to the age of 22. And then, of course, all children that are at risk go home to at-risk families. So our family size will focus on anything that the kid needs in order to be successful, whether that's housing them, making sure they have utilities on, making sure if there's a foster care student, they are reunited with their family. All the things that a kid needs to be successful, we are there for them until they're 22. And really, they're with us forever because they're always in our family, but 22 is our model. That's where it ends.
So your employees are very important to the success of this company. They work directly with these children, and wow.
Yeah. And many of them are actually results of our program. So we're close to our 4th generation of this model implementation in the Portland metro area. And so we are now looking at grandchildren of students that have gone through the program. So a lot of our staff were actually SEI kids.
Do you have some best practices that you've observed and that you love to test that you could share with us?
It's very interesting when people say best practices. I can vividly remember my first corporate job where those 2 words came up, and it was the first time that I had ever heard it. I was like in my late 20s and my mind was blown, right? Like, oh my God, best practices, the best thing. I need to know all of those. Like, is there a list? Where do I find it? And I think in my experience as a leader, you realize that best practices are really developed based on the culture, right? And everybody has a different set of best. That word best is relative to that specific culture. So sometimes you can bring things from other things to an agency if you come from somewhere else that may have worked somewhere else. But if you're not willing to take your experience best practices and adjust them to the culture and the people that are going to live that so-called best practice, it's not a best practice. So you have to be able to be flexible, and you definitely have to be able to be dynamic in your approach and practices, and make sure that the culture informs what a best practice is instead of you informing the culture what best is.
And are there some metrics that you use in order to measure engagement? There's so many out there: employee happiness, NPS. What are some of your favorites?
So at SEI, or Self Enhancement Incorporated, we like to talk about a love check. A lot of people talk about our culture, employees that often may decide to leave for other opportunities, they will come back and talk about the things that they miss. Portland is a very, very culturally diminished state. I will put it that way. So being a Black employee in Portland metro area can be complicated. And so our employment is very diverse. And I believe that that's part of the love check. We are like a family. And so even though it doesn't necessarily come out in your paycheck in dollars, it comes out in your daily feelings and how you feel about coming to work. And so that love check is really important to us in terms of how the environment is and how employees feel. That's the most important element of our culture.
Seems like a great place to work at Self
we got some openings.
So I'm going to move on to the next topic, which is remote work, which is such a relevant issue right now as well. Mm-hmm. So in your personal opinion, do you think that remote working is effective and or productive for a modern workforce?
I think it should absolutely be a part of all workforces if possible. I think that there's an element of work-life balance that has been enjoyed by many during this pandemic that most of us may not have been privy to before. Mm-hmm. And if you come from a household that is safe and secure, there's a lot of benefits in remote work. I think that if we are going to move towards remote work being more of an influence in the workforce, we have to be really, really diligent about making sure that all workers have what they need. It's really easy to say that the productivity is increased, and of course we're saving money. You don't have the same utilities costs, and all the brick and mortar costs will reduce when you have people working from their home. But then the real question is, what do people's homes look like, and how are we making sure as a nation people mm-hmm. can work from home and be comfortable? Mm-hmm. I do believe in it. I came from it before I came to Self Enhancement. I work for a large online remote company, international company. So I've been doing this for years. I think that it is a productive way to live. As a single parent, it's very helpful for me not to have the logistics of moving. And I do feel more productive, not just in my work, but in my home, which makes me more productive and more motivated to be more productive at work. So all those things are great features in remote work, but as a nation, we have work to do to make sure that the living wage is enough so folks can be comfortable in a safe, secure home.
Your human capital management solution, how has it enabled your employee engagement to continue to thrive during periods of remote work? Is there are there some features that have really helped you out, or how has it facilitated your employee engagement when your employees are not directly in front of you, when you can't just walk over to their office?
It's the word human capital management. Those words, I guess, it's an interesting approach. I know people manage human capital. We call it human resources. I know the world is trying to move toward a different term. But to me, human capital management starts with how many resources are your staff missing, like in life? Like, are you contributing to the system harms, or are you helpful in the way that people are elevating out of system harms? So are they below poverty level, or are they above it? So human capital management to me starts with caring about where people are in life. If you actually show up and care about where they are as people, human beings, they're going to show up for you. If you avoid that reality in their world and just manage their productivity throughout your day and think that you can separate their life from the work, then I think you're sadly mistaken. that it will always cost you. It will always have influence and impact in your work day. But we have to begin to start caring about how people are actually cared for at all levels, not just the top levels, because a lot of executives, including myself, the higher I go, the more I realize the privileges I have to negotiate and leverage benefits. Whereas as a person that doesn't have that is struggling. And so how do they show up completely? They can't. So we got to start investing in the whole person, not just the person that shows up at the job.
And are there some ways that that you're able to, even in remote work, that you're able to really connect with your employees? Maybe, I don't want to use the word best practices again, but you know what I mean? Are there just some
I'm famous for that. So I apologize. I'm famous for just screwing up people's terms and being like, oh gosh, I don't want to say that anymore. Yeah, you say whatever you want. I'm just telling you how I feel. But at the end of the day, I think for us, one of the things that we did that I really was excited about, we did a thing called the Self-Enhancement Smile Van. So we have vans for our kids that we usually use to travel around with our kids. They fit about 10 people, and myself and our founder would take the list of individuals that our teams would tell us these individuals are not doing well. It wasn't necessarily work well, right? Like in life, whether they are home alone or taking care of an elderly parent, whatever it was. We had a list that every week we got, and we would show up in the van on Saturdays and just smile and talk to them from the van. And it was, so we're the top 2 executives of the agency, right? And we would show up and be like, here, and it was around Christmas time that we started. So we showed up with poinsettias, and then, it was different gifts that we wind up trying to come up with. And it made a difference. I think people, when you look at the whole person and consider who they are, they appreciate that. You don't always have the ability to change their world immediately, but you can put a smile on people's face and say, I see you. And I see what you're going through, and I'm here, and I think that that's the first step in making sure that you support them doing the remote work. It doesn't have to be all clinical. It can be, feelings can be involved.
Is there any technology that you rely on or that helps you to encourage increased productivity with your employees?
Yeah. At this point, it's all about the computer and internet, right? Like if you don't have those 2 things, you're not connected. So yeah, I can't imagine what those industries are going through right now in terms of just the massive influx all of a sudden, right? In not in business practices, because I think a lot of those industries were ready for businesses to have a massive influx throughout the day. But you've got home level influxes, which I know they weren't ready for. So for us, it's computers and internet. Of course, your phone, cell phones are important. All those basic tools are important. So making sure your people have all that, right? And making sure that they can access is important.
So let's move on to the next topic, which is learning. So are you still, right now, obviously you can't hold learning sessions in the company. We can't have lunches together. How are you using technology to promote employee learning?
So our model was very analog, right? Everything that we did was based on people to people primarily. I mean, we used technology, but it was mostly an analog world. So learning began with COVID when we shut down the facilities because everyone had to become remote and use technology primarily as their communication tool, as a way that they implemented all facets of their job. So the learning curve was steep. Everything that we do is like show up, see a kid, show up, see a principal, show up, see somebody. And now all of a sudden you have to do that remotely. So I think that folks had to learn early. We did a lot of training really early on online tools like the Zooms, the Google Meets, like which one is best for you. Here's some whiteboards you could use with your students to engage with them. Here's some fun things. And I think for us, the learning curve was steep. But even though it was steep, we kept it fun. Our all staff meeting, since day one, since our very first all staff meeting, we start with music. So people come on, we listen to music, and then they get to jam out. At the end, we keep it on for another half an hour. So we've kept the learning curve fun, even though it's steep, it's fun. You're like, it's like hiking and you get that great guide that's talking to you so much, and then you get to the top and you're like, oh my God, we're already here. It's the same thing. You want people to climb, but you also want people to feel like, oh, that wasn't so bad. That was actually kind of cool.
And do you find that learning, or how can learning be used as a tool to grow your employees within an organization? So how do you use learning to help them to evolve?
Learning is a choice. I think a lot of times as leaders, we think we can force people to learn, but you have to actually be learning yourself. And I think that if you have an agency where learning is a culture from the top all the way down to whomever, then learning is easy. I think that learning is necessary to evolve and grow your agency or your organization, but you can't force it. You have to build that culture one step at a time, and building it will look different for every agency. And it also can't be shoved into the environment in a way where people can't metabolize it well. So I would say you got to take small pieces. You got to make sure that everybody's learning in front of everyone together, and acknowledging the learning together and acknowledging the mistakes together. And that's how you all grow. It has to be transparent so that it can be metabolized well.
Is there any advice that you would give just in general to, company leaders during this time for 2021?
So before I give advice, I would say, the average brain makes 35,000 decisions in a day. I think the executive is like double that in many industries. And during the pandemic, it's probably triple that. So first and foremost, I say to all executives, congratulations, you have just tripled your brain capacity. But in addition to that, advice I would say is don't be hard on yourself. I think that it's important to reflect and make sure that you know what has worked and how that worked and why that was important, impactful element of your agency. But I also think in that reflection as leaders, most executives are type A people, and so we can be very difficult on ourselves, and the self-talk can be destructive because it also can come out in your verbalizing your desires to staff and your intense need to be, excellent. But I would say make sure that you have moments where you acknowledge your greatness and acknowledge what has been done. And then after you take that celebration moment, move forward to the next step, but breathe on it.
Well, that concludes our interview for today. Do you have anything that you would like to add? I think that was a great conclusion that you gave, but if you have anything else that you want to say, we'd love to hear it.
Nothing in particular, except that I just think the world is a wonderful place with many opportunities. And as leaders of organizations, anyone in an organization, we just have a great opportunity to put together a package for the future of that organization that other people will have to walk through and live in. And it's a great moment to be that person to wrap that package up. So don't take it lightly and do a great job, because you might just create a job for my kids. So I need you to do a good job. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Libra, for joining us on today's Future of Work session by Criterion HCM. We appreciate taking your time to join us, and our listeners surely learned a great deal about today's conversation. Thank you.
Oh, I hope so. Good. Thank you for having me.